Imagine coming home from school one day, tired from classes and ready to relax, only to find that your room, your safe place, isn't yours anymore. Not because you moved out, not because something broke, but because your sister got pregnant. That's what happened to me. Stay with me, because you might not believe how quickly your own family can make you feel like a stranger in your own home. It was a regular Tuesday afternoon when I walked in, backpack still on my shoulder. The first thing I noticed was a stack of boxes by the hallway. My posters were rolled up inside them, my books stacked like I was moving out. I froze, confused. My bedroom door was open, and I could hear voices inside. Paige, my 19-year-old sister, was standing there with Mom, talking about where to put the crib. The walls, my walls, were already half-painted a soft pastel yellow. The bed I'd slept in since middle school was gone. What's going on? I asked, my voice shaking. Mom turned to me with a smile that felt more like a warning. Honey, Paige is pregnant. She's going to need your room. It's bigger, and she needs the space for the baby. I blinked at her, not sure I heard right. What? Where am I supposed to sleep? Dad stepped in from the hallway. The basement. It's only temporary. Just for a while. The basement. Cold, musty, smelling like old laundry and damp concrete. I'd been down there maybe twice, and both times I wanted to leave immediately. I stared at them, waiting for someone to laugh and say it was a joke. Nobody did. Paige just grinned a little, like she'd won something. But this is my room, I whispered. Dad sighed, already annoyed. Paige needs stability right now, Claire. You'll be fine. You're young, you can handle it. In that moment, I felt something twist inside me, like I'd been pushed out of my own life. My parents didn't even ask me, they just decided. All because Paige made a mistake, and they decided to reward her for it. Paige ran her hand over the baby furniture with a dreamy look. Thanks, Claire. This is going to be perfect for me and the baby. I wanted to scream, but my throat was tight. I walked down to the basement to see where they expected me to live. There was a single old couch pushed against the wall, a dusty rug, and a light bulb that flickered every few seconds. It didn't feel like a bedroom. It didn't even feel like part of the house. That night, I sat on the couch with my backpack still on my lap, wondering when my home stopped being mine. I didn't feel like a daughter anymore, just an inconvenience they could move out of the way. And for the first time, I realized how easy it was for the people you love most to make you feel like you don't belong. The first week in the basement felt like living in a storage closet no one cared about. The air was always damp, carrying the stale smell of old laundry and mildew. Even with a blanket wrapped around me, the chill seemed to sink into my bones. At night, the pipes creaked above my head, and I could hear muffled laughter and the sound of furniture being moved in what used to be my room. One afternoon, I climbed upstairs to grab some schoolwork I'd left on the kitchen counter. Passing by my old bedroom door, I caught a glimpse inside. The walls were now completely covered in pastel colors, soft pinks, yellows, and blues. There was a shiny white crib by the window, a rocking chair in the corner, and shelves stacked with tiny clothes and stuffed animals. My bookshelf was gone, replaced by baskets of baby toys. Mom stood in the middle of the room, smiling like she'd just seen a dream come true. Doesn't it look beautiful? Paige is really stepping up, keeping this baby. We're proud of her. I bit my tongue, because the words in my head weren't the kind you say out loud without starting a fight. Later that night, I heard voices through the floorboards above me. Paige was on the phone with one of her friends. Yeah, I totally lucked out, she said with a laugh. No way was I ready for a job. Now I've got the big room, and everyone's treating me like a queen. My hands clenched into fists. She wasn't even trying to hide how much she was taking advantage of the situation. The next day, I finally snapped. At dinner, I told Mom and Dad I didn't think it was fair. You took my room without even asking me, and now Paige is bragging about not having to work. Dad cut me off, his voice sharp. Claire, don't be ungrateful. Your sister is going through a lot. This isn't about you. Ungrateful. That word hit me like a punch. I'd been shoved into a basement, my space taken, my life turned upside down. But apparently I was the selfish one. School became harder. I couldn't focus in class, and my grades started slipping. Every time I came home, the house felt smaller and colder, even when I wasn't in the basement. Paige was always around, acting like she was doing everyone a favor just by existing. I started spending more time at the diner down the street, where I'd picked up a part-time job bussing tables. It was noisy, smelled like fries and coffee, and kept me on my feet for hours, but it felt better than being at home. At least there, people noticed when I worked hard. The basement might have been where I slept, but more and more, it didn't feel like where I lived. It was just where I waited until I could be somewhere, anywhere else. Noah was born in early spring. Everyone in the house acted like the sun rose and set on him. And sure, he was cute. Tiny hands, soft hair, eyes that blinked like he was still figuring out the world. But the constant crying quickly turned my life into a blur of sleepless nights. Upstairs, every sound seemed to travel through the floor and straight into my ear. The wail of Noah's cries at 2 a.m., the thud of footsteps pacing back and forth, the creak of the rocking chair. I'd lie awake in my basement room, staring at the ceiling, knowing I had a math test in the morning and no hope of concentrating. It didn't take long before my parents started making small requests. Claire, can you hold him for a bit while Paige showers? Or Claire, just keep an eye on him while we run to the store. At first, it was once in a while, but soon, it became every time Paige wanted to step outside. One Saturday morning, I came home from my shift at the diner and barely had time to drop my bag before Mom was handing Noah to me. Your sister's going out for a couple of hours. Watch him. I frowned. Can't she take him with her? She needs a break, Claire. Your family. Family helps each other. Family, apparently, meant doing free childcare whenever they decided. I was tired, my grades were still slipping, and I felt like I didn't have a life anymore. Then came prom night. I'd saved up for my dress, planned the evening with friends, and even found a ride so my parents wouldn't have to worry about me. But a week before, they dropped the news. Paige needs you to babysit Noah that night, Dad said casually, like it was no big deal. What? No. I have plans. This is my prom. I protested. Your sister hasn't had a night out in months. She needs this more than you do, Mom insisted. I felt my stomach drop. I'm not canceling prom for this. I've been looking forward to it all year. The argument escalated fast. Voices rose, faces tightened. Paige wandered into the room halfway through, rolling her eyes. Wow, Claire, it's just one night. You're so dramatic. I turned on her. It's not just one night. It's every night, every weekend, every time you want to go somewhere. I'm done being your free babysitter. That's when Dad's face went red. He slammed his hand on the table. If you hate it here so much, then leave. The words hung in the air like a dare. My heart pounded, but I didn't say another word. I just went downstairs, pulled out my duffel bag, and started packing. That night, I walked out the front door with my bag over my shoulder and took a taxi to my friend Tessa's house. For the first time in months, I fell asleep without hearing a baby cry. And for the first time in my life, I felt free. 5 years can change everything, or at least it did for me. By the time I was 22, I had my own small apartment, a steady job as a dental assistant, and a life that was entirely mine. I'd worked hard to get there, late night studying, early morning shifts, and countless days where I thought I might break but didn't. Since leaving home, I'd kept contact with my family to a minimum. My mom sent the occasional holiday text, short, polite, never personal. Merry Christmas, Claire. Hope you're well. Happy birthday. I replied just enough to be civil, but I never visited. The idea of stepping back into that house made my stomach twist. Then, one rainy Thursday evening, my phone rang. The screen lit up with home. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something made me swipe to answer. Claire, my mom's voice said, a little too warm, like she was trying too hard. We need you to come home. It's important. A serious family talk. The word serious family talk didn't sit right with me. We'd never had one of those unless it was about someone else's mistakes. And they certainly hadn't cared much about talking when I was sleeping in a cold basement. What's going on? I asked cautiously. It's better if we explain in person, she said. Can you come this weekend? Every instinct told me to say no. But part of me was curious about what could possibly be so urgent after 5 years of near silence. And I'll admit, another part of me wanted to see the state of things. I wondered if they were still the picture-perfect family they tried to be back when I lived there, or if the cracks had finally started to show. So that Saturday, I drove back to my old neighborhood. As I turned onto the familiar street, it struck me how small everything looked now. The trees I used to think were huge barely reached above the houses. The sidewalks were cracked, the paint on the fences faded. When I pulled into the driveway, the first thing I noticed was how tired the house looked. The siding was worn, the front steps chipped. Inside, the air felt heavier somehow. Paige was sitting on the couch when I walked in, her hair pulled back in a messy bun, dark circles under her eyes. Next to her was Noah, now 5, playing quietly with a toy car. He looked up at me with curious eyes, and I realized he had no memory of me at all. Claire, my dad said, coming into the room. We're glad you came. I nodded, setting my bag down, my eyes scanning the place that used to be home. It felt strange, like stepping into a memory that had warped over time. Whatever they were about to tell me, I already knew one thing. It wasn't going to be about mending the past. It was going to be about something they wanted. Walking through my old neighborhood felt like stepping into a shrunken version of my childhood. The streets I used to ride my bike on seemed narrower, the houses closer together, the yards smaller. Even the big oak tree at the corner, the one I once thought reached the clouds, looked tired and weathered. When I pulled into the driveway, the state of the house told me more than I needed to know. The paint was peeling in long strips, the gutter sagged, and the front lawn was more weeds than grass. Inside, the smell was different too, stale, with a hint of something burnt, like they'd tried to mask years of neglect with one too many scented candles. Paige was slouched on the couch in sweatpants, her hair tied in a loose, unbrushed bun. She looked up at me with heavy eyes, the kind that told you she hadn't had a proper night's sleep in a long time. Noah sat cross-legged on the floor, pushing a toy truck back and forth without much enthusiasm. He was taller than I'd imagined, but his quiet, watchful stare felt too old for a 5-year-old. We didn't exchange hugs, just a short, awkward hey. Mom and Dad called me into the kitchen. The table was buried under unopened mail and overdue bills. Dad rubbed the back of his neck, looking anywhere but at me. "We've been having some financial trouble," he started. "The mortgage is behind. Utilities, too. We're in a tough spot." Mom chimed in quickly, like she'd been rehearsing. "Paige's been doing her best, but it's hard. Noah's father isn't in the picture at all, and she's been focusing on raising him." I almost laughed at that. Paige focusing on raising him? From what I remembered, focusing meant finding someone else to watch him while she did whatever she wanted. Dad cleared his throat. "We were thinking, maybe you could move back in, help out with the bills, the house, and with Noah." There it was. The real reason for the sudden, serious family talk. Not because they missed me. Not because they wanted to fix things. They wanted my paycheck, my time, and my free labor. Paige leaned back in her chair, not even trying to hide her expectation. "It'd be great to have you around again," she said, like she was offering me the chance of a lifetime. I kept my expression neutral, even though inside I was seething. "I'll think about it," I said, forcing a small smile. Mom's face lit up like I'd already said yes. That's all we ask. But I knew right then and there what this was. It wasn't a family reunion. It was a transaction. And I wasn't about to pay the price without making sure it cost them something too. I stayed for dinner that night, mostly out of curiosity. The kitchen looked smaller than I remembered, and not just because it was cluttered. The fridge door was dented, one of the burners on the stove was covered in black scorch marks, and the dishwasher had a strip of duct tape holding its handle in place. The wallpaper, once a cheerful yellow, was now faded and peeling at the edges, curling like it was trying to escape the walls. While Mom reheated leftovers, I noticed a dark stain spreading across the ceiling above the dining table. A slow, steady drip landed in a plastic bowl they'd set on the floor. They didn't even look at it anymore. It was like background noise to them. We sat down to eat, and Paige immediately launched into a tirade. The washing machine's acting up again, and the car wouldn't start this morning, and the landlord down the street just raised rent on their tenants. Imagine if that happened. I bit back a laugh. "You own this house." She waved a hand. "Still, everything's falling apart." Not once did she suggest a way to fix any of it. She just complained, chewing loudly between sentences. Halfway through dinner, Dad started in with the guilt tripping. "You know, Claire, family should help family. We've always believed that." "Yeah," Mom added, giving me that pointed look. "We were there for you when you needed a home." I almost choked on my food. A home. They meant the damp basement they'd shoved me into when Paige needed my room. But I smiled instead, the kind of smile you give when you're filing something away for later. As the conversation went on, I realized something. They were desperate. The debt, the repairs, the day-to-day grind of raising Noah. It was all weighing on them, and they didn't have a plan. They saw me as their solution. And maybe I could be, just not in the way they imagined. That night, I pulled a small notebook from my bag and slipped it into my coat pocket. From now on, I was going to start keeping track of everything. Every chore they asked me to do, every errand they sent me on, every time I took care of Noah without pay. The next morning, I helped fix a clogged sink while Mom ran to the store. I didn't complain, didn't roll my eyes. I just noted it down. Kitchen sink unclogged, 1 hour. When Paige asked me to watch Noah so she could take a quick walk, I agreed and wrote, "Babysat Noah, 2 hours." They thought I was just being helpful, but I was keeping a quiet, careful record. Not for sympathy. Not for thanks. For leverage. Over the next week, I let them drop hints about how nice it would be if I stayed. I let them talk about how much easier things would be with another adult in the house. Then, one evening after dinner, I put down my fork and said, "I've been thinking. I'll help financially and with Noah, but I have conditions." 3 sets of eyes landed on me. First, I began. The basement gets fully renovated into my private living space. New flooring, paint, furniture, the works. Dad frowned. "That'll cost money we don't have." "I'll pay for it," I said, "but I'm doing it my way." Second, I continued, I get my own entrance and a key that no one else uses. I'm not a kid anymore. I want privacy. Mom shifted uncomfortably, but didn't argue. And third, I said, babysitting Noah is paid hourly. No more free favors. Paige laughed like I'd told a joke. Wow, charging your own family. That's cold. I didn't even look at her. My time is worth something. If you want my help, these are my terms. Dad leaned back in his chair, his jaw tight. You're asking a lot. I'm offering a lot, I replied calmly. They exchanged looks, silent but loud with worry. They couldn't afford to push me away, and they knew it. Finally, Dad sighed. Fine. We agree. The next day, I got to work. Contractors came in to strip out the damp carpet, replace the warped baseboards, and seal the walls against moisture. Fresh light gray paint brightened the space, and new recessed lighting replaced the single dangling bulb. I had a small kitchenette installed in one corner, a cozy bed against the far wall, and a desk for work. I even had a separate entrance built at the side of the house with a proper door and lock, my own path in and out without passing through the upstairs. Every receipt went into a neat folder in my desk drawer, organized by date and expense. I wasn't just making the basement livable. I was making it mine. Paige, of course, had something to say about it. Must be nice, she muttered one afternoon as I carried in a box of new dishes for my kitchenette. You're acting like a guest in a hotel. I glanced at her, then smiled. More like the owner of the suite. Her eyes narrowed, but she didn't push. I could feel the jealousy coming off her in waves. She wasn't used to me having boundaries or leverage. By the time the renovations were finished, the basement no longer smelled like mildew or looked like a storage room. It was warm, bright, and completely separate from the chaos upstairs. And every time I locked my new door behind me, I remembered, I wasn't here because they wanted me back. I was here because they needed me, and that meant I held the cards. Every dollar I spent went straight into my neatly organized folder. Renovation costs, mortgage payments I helped with, even the smaller fixes like replacing the broken dishwasher or patching the leaky ceiling. My name was on every receipt. I made sure of it. On the surface, it looked like I was just being responsible, keeping track of expenses, staying organized. But privately, I was laying the groundwork for something much bigger. One afternoon, while Noah napped upstairs, I took a quiet drive across town to meet with a lawyer. I told him everything, how I was paying for repairs, covering overdue mortgage payments, and making major improvements to the house. I explained that nothing was in writing yet. He leaned back in his chair. If you want legal protection, you need documentation. Co-ownership. That way, no one can take your investment without compensating you. It was exactly what I wanted to hear. Over the next few weeks, I let things unfold naturally. Every time Mom or Dad mentioned money problems, I nodded sympathetically and reminded them how much I'd already put in. If I'm going to keep investing, we should make it official, I said casually, like it was no big deal. They hesitated at first. Dad mumbled something about family trust and no need for legal stuff, but I stayed firm. I'm not saying I don't trust you, I told them with a smile, but this protects all of us. If anything happens, my investment is secure, and you know I'll keep helping. They were desperate, and desperation has a way of making people agree to things they'd normally fight against. A week later, we sat at the kitchen table with a notary present. The document was simple but powerful. In exchange for my ongoing financial contributions toward the mortgage and repairs, I'd be granted partial ownership of the house. My name would go on the title alongside there. Paige leaned against the counter, arms crossed, watching with an amused smirk. Seriously? You think a piece of paper means anything? You're still living in the basement. I didn't rise to the bait. I just slid the signed and stamped papers into my folder with the receipts. It means exactly what it needs to, I said lightly. She laughed like I was being ridiculous, but that was fine. Let her think it was meaningless. The less she understood, the better. Over the next month, I kept everything moving as usual, helping with bills, fixing small things around the house, babysitting Noah when I felt like it, and getting paid. From the outside, nothing had changed. But in my folder, behind the tidy stack of receipts, sat a legal document that shifted the balance of power in my favor. They thought I was just a generous daughter and sister, giving more than I took. In reality, I'd just become a co-owner of the very house they once forced me out, and I knew exactly how I planned to use that. It was about 8 months after I'd officially become a co-owner when I decided it was time to make my move. By then, the basement was exactly how I wanted it. My receipts folder was thicker than ever, and the house upstairs hadn't improved much. If anything, it looked worse. The repairs I hadn't personally handled had been ignored, and the debt situation hadn't magically disappeared. One Saturday morning, I called everyone into the kitchen. Mom and Dad sat at the table, coffee mugs in hand. Paige hovered near the fridge, scrolling through her phone, while Noah played quietly on the floor. I've made a decision, I said, placing my folder on the table. I'm putting the house on the market. The silence was instant and heavy. Mom blinked at me like she didn't understand the words. Dad's jaw tightened. Paige's phone slipped from her hands and hit the floor with a dull thud. You can't do that, Mom said finally, her voice sharp. I can, I replied evenly. I'm a legal co-owner. I've contributed financially for months. Actually, Years if you count what I've put into this place. I have every right to sell my share. Paige's face went pale. Claire, you can't just kick us out. This is Noah's home. I'm not kicking you out, I said calmly. If you want to stay, you can buy me out. Dad's hands curled into fists on the table. You know we can't afford that. I nodded. Then the sale moves forward. Paige's eyes filled with tears. Please, Claire, don't do this. We have nowhere else to go. You can't do this to your own family. The words stung, but not in the way she wanted them to. I remembered every cold night in that basement, every time they'd told me to be grateful, every free babysitting shift I'd been forced into. They'd done this to themselves. I gave you months to get things in order, I said quietly. You didn't. This isn't my problem anymore. The next few weeks were chaos. A real estate agent came to take photos, which sent Mom into a frenzy of half-hearted cleaning. Dad argued with me almost daily, but legally, he couldn't stop the process. Paige stopped speaking to me entirely except for muttered insults when I passed her in the hallway. When the house finally sold, they were forced to find something within their budget. That ended up being a cramped 2-bedroom rental across town, far from the neighborhood they'd clung to for so long. I moved into my own sunny apartment, the kind of place where I could open the windows without smelling mildew, and where every square foot was mine. Paige and Noah's new place had barely enough room for the two of them, and Mom and Dad had to squeeze into the other bedroom. It wasn't revenge in the loud, dramatic sense, but it was justice. They'd taken my space once. Now I'd taken theirs. The morning air was cool and sharp, the kind that hinted at the first bite of autumn. The moving truck sat in the driveway like a silent witness, its ramp creaking as movers hauled out couch cushions, battered dressers, and boxes that looked ready to fall apart. I stood near the mailbox, arms crossed, watching it all unfold. My parents moved in and out of the house like shadows, Dad barking directions, Mom clutching a clipboard she didn't need. Every so often, they'd throw me a glare, like I'd personally orchestrated the fall of our family. Maybe I had. Paige was there too, perched on the porch steps with her arms wrapped around herself. She didn't look at me. In fact, she hadn't said a single word to me since I'd announced the sale months ago. Her silence wasn't heavy. It was hollow, like she'd already used up every accusation and insult she had. I wasn't here for them, though. My eyes drifted to the front yard, where Noah sat cross-legged on the grass, a little plastic dinosaur clutched in his small hand. He was 5 now, bigger than the swaddled infant I'd once been forced to babysit, but still too young to understand the full scope of what was happening. I walked over and crouched down beside him. Hey, buddy, I said softly. He looked up at me, his brown eyes wide. Are you leaving? Yeah, I said, but I wanted to give you something. From my pocket, I pulled out a tiny red race car I'd picked up the day before. It wasn't expensive, but it was new, bright, unchipped paint, smooth wheels that spun easily. I placed it in his palm, and his fingers curled around it instantly. Thanks, he murmured, smiling a little. I reached out and ruffled his hair. Take care of yourself, okay? He nodded, and I stood, my knees cracking as I straightened. I didn't look at Paige or my parents again. There was no point in offering a victory speech or one last cutting remark. They wouldn't hear it, and I didn't need to say it. The win wasn't in their acknowledgement, it was in my leaving. I walked to my car, the mover's shouts fading behind me. When I slid into the driver's seat, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. The house in the rearview mirror looked smaller than I'd ever seen it, shrinking further as I backed down the street. By the time I hit the main road, it was gone entirely. I didn't feel triumphant in a movie ending kind of way. It was quieter than that, steady, certain, like finally closing a door you'd been holding shut for years. I owed them nothing now, and for the first time in my life, I was truly free. What about you? Do you think Claire made the right choice by cutting ties and starting fresh, or should she have stayed and tried to fix things with her family? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'm curious to hear your take. And if you enjoy stories filled with twists, drama, and a touch of poetic justice, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss the next one.